The Pacific awoke in absolute silence. Nothing on the horizon revealed what was about to come. At the center of that emptiness stood a small ring of sand, a piece of land too small to seem important, but it was there that the fate of the ocean would be decided. Observers climbed improvised towers with binoculars in hand. Their eyes scanned the horizon without blinking. The radio crackled like an insect trapped inside a box. Every noise felt like a warning. The war had already swallowed entire continents. Now it was approaching that isolated point. On the other side of the world, engines began to roar. Steel decks vibrated under tons of machinery. Bombs were fastened to wings in focused silence. Propellers spun slowly, like deep breaths. The air smelled of salt, fuel, and anxiety. Crews checked every bolt as if it were the last. Maps were spread across narrow tables, routes traced straight into the unknown. No one spoke more than necessary. The silence weighed heavier than any weapon. In the clear sky, a single bird crossed the island. It was the last image of peace that day. Suddenly, the radio caught a different sound. It wasn't interference, it was movement. A distant formation emerged beyond the clouds, too small to identify, too large to ignore. The observers exchanged brief glances. Something had finally been found. The alarm hadn't sounded yet, but the fear was already there. In the open sea, the fleets remained invisible to each other. Giants of steel separated by miles of nothing. Each side believed it had the element of surprise, but the sky held secrets no one had calculated, and the invisible clock of history began to tick. The wind rose like an omen. Sirens shattered the silence for the first time. Men dropped their rest and ran to their stations. Steel doors slammed like thunder. On the deck, propellers truly began to spin. The air grew thick with the smell of fuel. Hand signals coordinated every movement. The first wheels started rolling. The ocean reflected the metal like a broken mirror. Then the first plane left the ground. Soon another followed, and then another. The sky began to fill with moving shadows. Each pilot carried a fate he could not foresee. Below, the atoll seemed too small to save anything, but everything depended on it. On the opposite horizon, another fleet did the same. Two forces advancing blindly toward each other, separated only by miles of empty water. The first clash could happen at any moment, and in that moment, the war finally began. The sun had not yet risen when the radar picked up distant echoes emerging on the empty horizon. Officers leaned over maps, calculating routes, while the silence weighed like lead on the deck. Messengers rushed through metal corridors carrying hastily written orders. Aircraft engines slowly began to turn, breaking the stillness of the dawn. Crews tightened their straps and goggles, taking a deep breath before the inevitable. Inside the cramped hangars, bombs were fastened to wings with grease-shaking hands. The first plane took off and vanished into the bluish morning mist. Others followed behind, forming a fragile line toward the unknown. Below, the ocean seemed far too calm for what was about to happen. Low clouds hid the enemy fleet like a dangerous secret. Pilots checked compasses and stopwatches, trusting only numbers and instinct. Fuel dropped steadily, and the emptiness of the sky began to feel endless. Some feared they had lost their way and considered turning back. Then, suddenly, a gray silhouette appeared through the clouds like a metallic mirage. Then another, and another, revealing the entire fleet asleep below. Enemy carriers looked like floating cities surrounded by escorts. For a moment, no one attacked, absorbing the scale of the target. Then, the dive bombers tipped their noses downward. The world turned into a vertical cliff as the air screamed against the wings. A distant siren echoed across enemy decks as they realized the danger too late. Anti-aircraft guns tore the sky with black lines of smoke. Nearby explosions shook formations and shattered the perfect alignment. One plane was hit and spiraled uncontrollably toward the sea. The others kept diving, prisoners of their own decision. The enemy deck rushed upward far too fast in their sights. Bombs dropped and fell, spinning in absolute silence. A direct hit tore through the hull like a hollow thunderclap. Flames climbed through ammunition elevators like hungry fire. Men ran without direction as smoke swallowed everything. The water around the ships reflected the blaze like a burning mirror. Another squadron arrived seconds later, exploiting the chaos already unfolding. The second carrier tried to maneuver, but it was heavy and slow. Bombs struck the flight deck crowded with fueled aircraft. Fire met, spilled fuel, and turned into an instant inferno. Metal fragments flew like leaves in the wind. The air smelled of burnt oil and salt. From above, the pilots realized they had changed the course of the battle, but critical fuel forced an immediate return. On the way back, silence replaced the adrenaline. Some spaces in the formation remained empty forever. On the Allied deck, sailors stared at the horizon, waiting for dark specks to reappear. The first plane landed hard, tires smoking. Others touched down nearly out of fuel, bouncing against arresting cables. Mechanics rushed to refuel and repair damage in haste. The wounded were pulled carefully from their cockpits. Confused reports piled up in the command room. Then confirmation arrived. 2 major targets were burning. The mood shifted from tension to restrained hope, but the radio intercepted transmissions warning of an imminent counterattack. Victory was still far from certain. In the distant sky, new dots appeared, moving far too fast. Enemy bombers seeking revenge. Sirens rang across the fleet like a final warning. Gunners rushed to their stations with fresh ammunition. The once calm sea now trembled with engines and shouted orders. The next wave would decide who remained afloat by sunset. The fate of the entire ocean seemed compressed into these few minutes. Everyone held their breath as the silhouettes grew on the horizon. The blue sky transformed once more into a battlefield, and the war began again as if nothing had been won. The smoke still blankets the horizon as silence finally returns to the deck. Exhausted men stare at the sea as if expecting another attack to rise from the clouds. The smell of burned fuel mixes with the salt of the Pacific. Reports arrive confirming enemy ships ablaze and drifting. Officers exchange incredulous glances as if they hardly dare to believe it. Just hours earlier, the fleet seemed doomed. Now, the balance of the war begins to shift. Crews count the aircraft that never returned. Names are crossed off clipboards with trembling pencils. The price of victory becomes visible in the empty spaces on the deck. Cranes slowly retrieve wreckage from the sea. Floating helmets remind them of those left behind. Even so, engines roar back to life for new patrols. The danger has not ended. It has only retreated. The sun sinks, painting everything in burnt orange. Far away, an enemy carrier burns out of control. Internal explosions shake the already doomed hull. Ammunition detonates like muffled thunder. The structure finally gives way and begins to sink. Water swallows tons of steel as if they were weightless. Witnesses watch in absolute silence. Each ship that disappears takes months of planning with it. The sea closes over the surface as if nothing had happened. But history has already been changed forever. Radio messages confirm multiple enemy losses. 4 giants vanished within hours. Air supremacy changes hands. The Pacific no longer belongs to the same masters. Sailors sit on the deck, too exhausted to celebrate. Some simply stare at the sunset. Others write quick letters they may never send. Mechanics wipe grease away in respectful silence. The ship sails on in formation with the survivors. The propellers cut through the water like a steady heartbeat. Night begins to fall over the victorious fleet. Minimal lights are switched on to avoid detection. The sky fills with cold stars. The ocean once again seems infinite and calm. But everyone knows that day redefined the fate of the war. It was there that the Pacific changed hands forever.